It was the dead of night when Amanda's phone rang, a shrill noise that cut through the eerie silence of her apartment. She didn't. Who could it be? Amanda had moved into this quaint town to start over. It was quiet, perhaps too quiet, but it had offered her a fresh start, far away from her previous life in the city, where things had spiraled out of control after a broken engagement. She chose a cozy, but slightly isolated apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind where neighbors kept to themselves and no one asked too many questions. But this phone call, it stirred something deep within her. She hung up, shaken, convincing herself it was a prank, some bored kid messing around. But the calls continued, night after night, always at the same time, 12:15 a.m. The voice on the other end never said more than a few words. Sometimes it was just her name, whispered slowly, hauntingly. Other times, the voice would say things like, "I'm closer than you think," or "You left the window unlocked." Amanda started losing sleep, her paranoia taking over. She checked her windows and doors religiously, kept the curtains drawn, and even switched phones, but nothing worked. The calls followed her no matter what. Amanda decided to report the incidents to the local police. She met with Detective Mike Sanders, a seasoned officer with a cynical attitude. He dismissed her concerns at first, believing it to be nothing more than a local prank. But Amanda persisted. There was something about the voice on the other end of the line. It was personal, too familiar. After some investigating, Sanders discovered something disturbing. The number calling Amanda wasn't traceable. It wasn't coming from any landline or cell tower. The calls weren't being logged in the system. It was as if the calls were coming from nowhere, or from somewhere else. These things happen sometimes. Ghost calls, they're called. But usually it's a glitch. Nothing more, Sanders explained, though Amanda could hear the doubt in his voice. But Amanda knew better. She began to piece together the strange occurrences in her life since moving to this town. The feeling of being watched, items in her apartment being slightly out of place, and now these calls. It couldn't be a coincidence. One late evening, as Amanda pored over her phone records, she found something unusual. The number calling her wasn't just random. It was tied to a name, and not just any name, Paul Summers, her ex-fiancé. The revelation hit her. The next night, the call came again. This time, Amanda didn't answer. Instead, she let it ring, her heart pounding in her chest. But the ringing didn't stop. Her phone vibrated endlessly on the coffee table. Desperation filled her as she finally picked it up. Before she could speak, the voice interrupted. "I never left, Amanda. I'm here. I've always been here." Her mind raced. She slammed the phone down, but it was useless. The ringing resumed almost immediately. Terrified, Amanda grabbed her coat and rushed out of her apartment. She needed to get away. Anywhere but here. But as she raced down the stairs, she felt it, eyes watching her. Something was following her. Amanda ran to the police station, desperate for help. Detective Sanders was already there, waiting. He looked grim, a file in his hand. "We did some more digging on your ex," Sanders said, placing the file on the desk between them. "Paul didn't die in an accident. His body was never found. The car was wrecked, yes, but he vanished that night. Some people think he faked his death. Others say he didn't survive, but didn't quite die either." Amanda's hands trembled as she flipped through the file. Paul had been involved in strange, occult-like activities before his disappearance. There were rumors that he had been trying to cheat death, searching for a way to become more than human. That night, back in her apartment, Amanda sat in the dark. The calls had stopped, but she could still feel his presence, closer now, lurking just beyond her vision. Suddenly, the lights flickered and her phone buzzed one last time. The screen lit up with a single word. "Look behind you." Amanda turned slowly, every muscle in her body tensing. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room, tall and motionless. Paul. His face was pale, sunken, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He smiled, a twisted grin that sent Amanda into a spiral of fear. "I told you, Amanda, I never left." Amanda couldn't believe what she was seeing. Paul, her ex-fiancé, standing before her, but something was horrifically wrong. His skin was gaunt, his eyes hollow, as if death had taken him but refused to let go completely. The air grew heavy, suffocating her with the stench of decay. She stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp as she tried to comprehend the impossible. He wasn't human anymore. Paul took a step. No idea where she was going, but anywhere was better than being trapped in that apartment with whatever Paul had become. Amanda needed answers. She rushed to the only place she could think of, the town's small library, which housed old archives on local legends and strange happenings. She remembered Detective Sanders mentioning something about Paul's involvement in occult practices. Maybe there was something there that could explain how this was happening. The librarian, an older woman with glasses and a look of skepticism, guided Amanda to the back room, where dusty tomes on forgotten rituals and dark magic lined the shelves. Amanda flipped through the pages feverishly, searching for anything that could explain how Paul had cheated death, or at least come back from it. And then she found it. The binding ritual. According to the text, there was a ritual that allowed someone to tether their soul to the physical world, even after death. The ritual required a personal connection, an object of deep significance between the living and the dead. Amanda's blood ran cold as she realized what it was, the engagement ring. Paul had given her the ring shortly before they broke up, and she had thrown it into a drawer, unable to part with it despite their tumultuous ending. That was the connection. The ring was the tether keeping Paul anchored to this world. Armed with this new knowledge, Amanda devised a plan. She had to break the bond. She had to destroy the ring. But there was one problem. The ring was still in her apartment, and Paul, or whatever he was now, would be waiting for her. Amanda didn't care. She couldn't keep living in fear. She had to end this, once and for all. She called Detective Sanders and explained everything, but even he sounded doubtful. "This sounds like something out of a horror movie," he muttered, but Amanda insisted. "I know how this sounds, but I need your help. I can't do this alone." Reluctantly, Sanders agreed to meet her at her apartment. Together, they prepared to face whatever awaited them. Amanda and Sanders arrived at her apartment in the dead of night, the tension thick in the air. The moment they stepped inside, a deep chill settled over the room. The lights flickered, and shadows danced along the walls. Paul's presence was palpable, like a malevolent force pressing down on them. The ring was still in the drawer where Amanda had left it. Paul's face contorted in rage. The room trembled as if the very foundations were being shaken by his fury. The lights flickered violently, casting erratic shadows. "You'll never be rid of me." With a scream, Amanda hurled the ring into the fireplace. The flames licked at it, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deafening roar erupted from Paul, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't even alive. His body convulsed, twisting unnaturally as the fire consumed the ring. The room exploded in blinding light, and Paul's form began to disintegrate, pieces of him evaporating like smoke. His eyes, once cold and full of hatred, locked onto Amanda's one last time. "You can't escape," and then he was gone. The apartment fell into silence, save for the crackling of the dying flames. It was over. The bond had been broken, and Paul's spirit had been sent back to wherever it had come from. Amanda collapsed into a chair, her body shaking from the adrenaline and fear. Sanders, pale and wide-eyed, holstered his gun. "That wasn't normal," he muttered, finally understanding that Amanda had been telling the truth all along. Amanda nodded, staring into the embers of the fire where the ring had melted away. She knew it was over, but the experience had changed her forever. No matter how far she ran, how much she tried to escape her past, it had found her. But now, she had faced it, and she had won, or so she thought. A few weeks later, Amanda packed her bags, ready to leave the small town behind and start fresh once again. The nightmare with Paul was finally over, and she could move on with her life. As she closed the door to her apartment for the last time, she felt a strange sense of relief. But that night, as she unpacked in her new home, Amanda's phone buzzed on the table. A message. The number was unknown, but the text was clear. "I'm still here." Her blood ran cold. The screen cut to black. The text left Amanda in a state of shock, her heart hammering in her chest. "I'm still here." She stared at the message, hoping it was a prank, but deep down, she knew better. There was no escaping the horror that followed her. Even with the ring destroyed, Paul's presence lingered. The nightmare wasn't over. Amanda immediately called Detective Sanders. "He's back," she whispered, barely able to form the words. Sanders sighed on the other end. "Amanda, that's not possible. We saw him disappear." Locking the doors, but the sense of dread only grew. When Sanders arrived, he found Amanda pacing, her face pale and her eyes wild with fear. "You're sure about the text?" Sanders asked, scanning her phone screen as if it held the answer. "Yes, it's him. It's always been him," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know how, but Paul is still here somehow. What if destroying the ring wasn't enough? What if there's more to this?" Sanders scratched his head, clearly out of his depth. "I'll admit, I've seen some strange things in my career, but this, I don't know what to make of it. But if he's still here, we need to figure out how to get rid of him, for good this time." Amanda nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She couldn't live in fear forever. There had to be a way to end this once and for all. They just needed to find out what was keeping Paul tethered to her, even after the ring's destruction. As they sifted through the events of the past few weeks, something clicked. Paul's obsession with her had gone beyond the usual heartbreak. There was something deeper, something sinister. The occult research they had found mentioned more than just the ring. It spoke of emotional ties, bonds that could keep spirits in the world of the living. The bond between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Amanda and Sanders returned to the library, combing through every piece of information they could find on the binding ritual. That's when they uncovered the horrifying truth. The ring had been only one part of the ritual. The other piece was tied to Amanda herself, her fear. The text read, "As long as the living one is bound by fear, the spirit shall remain." It hit Amanda like a freight train. The ritual wasn't about an object, it was about her. Paul's spirit was feeding off her terror, her inability to move on, keeping him alive in the shadows. The more she feared him, the more power he had over her. Amanda's fear was the final key. "He's using my fear against me," she murmured, staring blankly at the text. "He's not just haunting me, he's thriving off it." Sanders looked at her, his expression hardening with resolve. "Then we need to take away his power." Back at Amanda's home, the air was thick with anticipation. She stood in the center of the room, clutching a photo of her and Paul during better times, before everything went wrong. If she wanted to truly relationship, and finally, the bitter end. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Amanda knew she couldn't let the fear control her anymore. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Paul," she whispered into the empty room, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The lights flickered. The room grew icy cold. Suddenly, Paul appeared. His twisted, ghostly form stood in the shadows, watching her with hollow eyes. His mouth opened, and a low, menacing voice filled the room. "You can't escape me, Amanda. I'll always be with you." But this time, Amanda didn't flinch. She didn't run. Instead, she stepped forward, meeting his gaze, refusing to give in to the terror that had gripped her for so long. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she repeated, louder this time. "You don't control me." The room began to shake. Paul's figure wavered, as if struggling to stay anchored to the world. His face contorted in rage, but Amanda held her ground, her voice steady. "I let go of you, Paul. I release you." The ground beneath her seemed to rumble, and Paul's form started to break apart, fading like smoke caught in the wind. His furious expression melted away, replaced by one of disbelief. The more Amanda stood firm, the weaker his presence became. Finally, with one last defiant look, Paul's ghost disintegrated completely, vanishing into nothingness. The room fell silent. It was over. Truly over this time. Amanda collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but free. The air felt lighter, and the house no longer held that oppressive feeling of dread. The shadows were just shadows now. Paul was gone. Sanders helped her to her feet, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "You did it, Amanda. You beat him." She nodded, feeling the weight lift from her chest. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again. She had faced her darkest fear and emerged victorious. As the sun rose the next morning, Amanda stood by the window, watching the golden light spill into the room. The nightmare had finally ended, and with it, the haunting presence that had tormented her. She was ready to move on with her life, free from the past. Months later, Amanda had settled into a new life. The terror of Paul's haunting seemed like a distant memory, though it still haunted her dreams from time to time. But she was stronger now, no longer a prisoner to her fear. One evening, as she was getting ready, it lay there, buzzing faintly as the silence that followed the message seemed to stretch on for an eternity. Her mind raced. Could Paul really be back? She had destroyed the ring, severed the bond, confronted her fear. How could he still have power over her? Trembling, Amanda picked up the phone and glanced at the screen again. The call had ended, but something about the number was unsettling. It wasn't just random digits. It was familiar. It was her old number. Panic surged through her veins. Was Paul manipulating the very things she thought were hers? Could he be entwined with her life in ways she couldn't even comprehend? Amanda knew she couldn't run anymore. She needed answers, real answers, and there was only one person who might have them. The medium. Amanda had heard whispers about a woman who lived in the neighboring town, a medium, someone who could communicate with the dead and help troubled souls find peace. It was risky, but Amanda was out of options. The woman's house was deep in the woods, an old, weathered cabin that looked like it had stood for centuries. Amanda knocked tentatively, half expecting no one to answer, but the door creaked open, revealing a woman draped in a flowing black robe. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, seemed to pierce through Amanda. "You're being followed," the medium said without preamble. Amanda's breath hitched. "How did you?" "Come in," the woman interrupted, waving her hand. "We need to act quickly." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning sage and something older, something ancient. Candles lined the room, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The medium sat across from Amanda, her expression grave. "He's still here because the bond wasn't fully broken," the medium explained. "The ritual you performed severed the physical connection, but you didn't account for the spiritual one." Amanda's heart sank. "What do you mean?" The medium leaned closer, her voice a low whisper. Paul didn't just bind himself to you with the ring. His obsession with you became something much darker. It became a curse, a spiritual tie that death itself couldn't sever. Amanda's hands shook as the medium lit incense, chanting softly in a language Amanda didn't recognize. As the smoke filled the room, the medium's eyes glazed over, and she began to speak in a voice that wasn't entirely her own. Paul's spirit lingers. Go there and release him. Only then will he truly be gone. Release him? Amanda asked, incredulous. How? The medium's gaze hardened. By confronting your deepest fear. The curse lives because you still carry the burden of what happened between you and Paul. You need to forgive yourself, Amanda, and you need to forgive him too. Armed with the medium's cryptic instructions, Amanda drove toward the place where Paul had died. The spot of the car crash that had taken him from the world of the living, but clearly not from her life. It was an old, winding road on the outskirts of town, barely used anymore, swallowed by the forest on both sides. As she neared the crash site, the air grew colder, unnaturally so. The trees seemed to close in around her, casting long shadows that twisted like claws. The wind picked up, howling through the branches as if the very forest knew what was coming. Amanda parked at the edge of the road and stepped out. In the fading light of dusk, she could see the remnants of the crash. Broken branches, tire marks on the dirt, and the faint outline of a makeshift memorial someone had left long ago. Her heart pounded as she approached the site. There, in the silence of the forest, she could feel him. Paul was here. The medium had given her a small vial of salt and herbs, along with instructions to create a protective circle. Amanda knelt by the crash site, her breath coming in short, shaky bursts. She scattered the contents in a wide circle around her, whispering the words the medium had taught her. It was supposed to ward off Paul's spirit long enough for her to do what she needed to. As soon as the circle was complete, the air around her seemed to thrum with energy. The wind died suddenly, and an eerie stillness settled over the area. Amanda stood in the center of the circle, clutching her chest as the oppressive feeling of Paul's presence grew stronger. And then he appeared. Paul's ghostly figure materialized before her, more solid than it had been in the apartment. His eyes were hollow, his face a grotesque mix of anger and sadness. He stared at her, unblinking, as if waiting. "I'm still here, Amanda," his voice rasped, echoing through the trees. "I'll always be here." Amanda's fear surged, but she fought to control it. This was what Paul wanted, what the curse fed on. She couldn't give in. "I know you're here, Paul," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm letting you go." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Paul's form flickered, growing weaker, his figure unraveling like mist caught in the wind. "You can't," he whispered, but there was no anger in his voice now, only sorrow. "Don't know how to let go." "You don't have to hold on anymore," Amanda said, stepping toward him. "It's over. I forgive you, and I forgive myself." With those words, the curse broke. The air around her seemed to lift, and Paul's ghostly figure dissolved into the night, his presence fading into the void. There was no scream, no dramatic display, just silence, peaceful and final. Amanda collapsed to the ground, sobbing quietly as the weight of the past few months finally lifted from her shoulders. The curse was broken. Paul was gone, truly gone. As she sat in the darkening forest, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. The air was still, calm. The haunting presence that had followed her for so long was no more. She stood up, wiped her tears, and took one last look at the crash site before turning to leave. The forest seemed less menacing now, the shadows no longer hiding threats but simply part of the natural world. Amanda breathed deeply, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs. She was free. Back at home, Amanda settled into bed, the first restful sleep she'd had in what felt like years. The nightmares were over. Paul was at peace, and so was she. As she drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed one last time on the nightstand. With a calm heart, she picked it up, already knowing what she'd see, a message from an unknown number. But this time it simply read, "Thank you." The screen faded to black. Amanda stared at the message on her phone, the simple words resonating in the quiet of her room. "Thank you." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, her heart felt light. There was no fear, no haunting presence lurking in the shadows, just peace. Paul was gone. The bond between them had been severed, and now both of them were free. She had done the impossible, facing her darkest fears and emerging stronger. As Amanda sat in the quiet of her home, she reflected on everything that had happened. The terror, the uncertainty, the relentless haunting. It all seemed like a distant nightmare now. But she had survived. She had overcome. A part of her would always carry the memories, the scars of what she had endured. Haunted by nightmares or the ghost of the man she had once loved. But just before sleep claimed her, she thought she heard it. A faint whisper in the quiet darkness. "Goodbye." Amanda smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. It was truly over. If you enjoyed this story and want more spine-chilling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Whispers in the Dark. I post new, terrifying stories that will haunt your thoughts long after they end. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new horror story. Keep the lights on. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows.